The first rule of cults is that you're never in a cult. Yeah, so I think what's interesting is the word cult is defined differently by different people.
Today we're having pasta.
Hi friends, welcome to Makan and Meaning, where I aim to make book videos that are thoughtful, kind, and nuanced. Today we'll be talking about Uncultured, a memoir by Daniella Mestyanek Young. So this is a book about her experience growing up in the Children of God cult, also known as the family, and how she escaped and how she made it to school, college, and then the US Army. And after that, comparing the US Army to the cult she grew up in, and all the trigger warnings apply. I think I found it very hard to read the book. I had to put it down a few times because there was a lot of sexual assault within the religious organization she was in, and toward her as a very, very young girl, and as she was growing up. So it was very uncomfortable to me, who is assigned female at birth. And yeah, so I just like to talk about a few things that struck me. And something that was very striking is the first rule of cults is that you're never in a cult. This is very interesting. Being someone who used to be in an evangelical megachurch, a lot of people would call a cult. But let's talk about cults today. Yeah, so I think what's interesting is the word cult is defined differently by different people. So in Singapore, some might not know that the Jehovah's Witnesses are banned. So they have been banned in Singapore since 14 January 1972, mostly because their members cannot or will not serve national service. I think they believe there is a verses in the Bible that argue that they're not supposed to take up arms. So their members don't serve national service, and because of that, they are banned. And also, I think they are not supposed to salute the flag and swear an oath of allegiance. So, I mean, apart from the other things, so I believe that it's not illegal to be a member. You will not be arrested, but they cannot hold congregational meetings. So I believe the Singapore members, they go to across the causeway in JB, Malaysia, to have services. I believe there was an article on that recently. But yes, so according to a country, I guess they would not call it a cult, but the Jehovah's Witnesses are banned. So it's the country's prerogative. So yeah, so I guess in a sense that's how. So the country doesn't label the Jehovah's Witnesses as a cult, but they are banned. But on the other hand, the second example I would give would be that mainstream churches in Singapore, most of them would consider not just the Jehovah's Witnesses, but the Seventh-day Adventists and also the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons, as cults. So yeah, I think that it's very interesting because when I was on the train, and if you take the trains in Singapore, you have seen the Mormons with their neatly pressed white shirts, interesting ties, and black name tag, and you go talking around to people. Missionaries from Utah or wherever in the States they're from. So once I spoke to one of them, and they brought me to their meeting house in Newton, and I sat down and talked to them and asked them many questions. So that's when I realized that I never understood why they were considered a cult, but I realized that it's because they are not Trinitarian. So, if I'm not mistaken, both the Seventh-day Adventists and the Mormons are considered cults because they don't believe in a Trinitarian God. So for those who are interested, you can read up about it on the internet. But at least in Singapore, I believe the mainstream Christians believe that those who are not Trinitarian are not Christians. So what was very surprising to me was, because I thought that as I used to be a mainstream Christian, and yeah, I spoke with them, but the Mormons genuinely consider themselves Christians, just not Trinitarian Christians, which was a surprise to me. So I attended a Unitarian Universalist church when I was visiting San Francisco, California, and I was surprised to find out that it was built in 1889. So the Unitarian Universalists, for those who are not familiar, are the Unitarians who do not believe in a Trinitarian God, hence the word Unitarian, and the Universalists who do not believe in a hell. So you don't find that in Singapore, and what I thought was interesting was when I spoke with the senior pastor and the youth pastor, I couldn't really get a sense of what it was about. They gave me a few books, but that was when I realized that there were alternatives out there. And when I was curious and picked up a book called The Evangelical Universalist, trying to learn more about it, and when I argued that maybe a loving God wouldn't send people to hell, and I posted it up on Instagram, my friend from the evangelical church I used to be, megachurch I used to be in, immediately shot me down and said, how can that be? Then why did Jesus die on the cross? So I thought that was very interesting because I showed a few things. So nothing wrong with having strong beliefs, but I think if you don't, if they are unquestioning obedience, usually it's very suspect to me, because I think that we should have a thinking, a faith that it's alive and thinking, and it's important to me to understand the other's perspective before shooting them down. So for example, if my friend had read the book and argued with me scripturally, I think it would make more sense to me. But yeah, I find that even on the like the hot button issue these days is about the views scripture has on homosexuality. So to me, this parallels the views scripture has on women and on slavery. And unfortunately in Singapore, we have certain views in the mainstream church, which I will not rehash. But what I think is interesting is the unquestioning obedience people have towards the views of their senior leadership, and the reason why I left my evangelical megachurch, and the straw that broke the camel's back was once there was a pastor from New York. So he was preaching in a service, and then when he cracked a transphobic joke, as the congregation of 5,000-6,000 people roared in laughter, I walked out, and I was very, very offended. Yeah, because as an evangelical, I was going to bring my trans friends to church, and how would they react? And when I tried to raise the issue, I was told I was overreacting, and I was told even if the pastor cracked a transphobic joke, he meant no harm. We must trust in his character. So I feel that that's unquestioning obedience, and I think that can be very harmful, because clearly, even when a wrong has been done, people still continue to support their pastor. I think that we are human and we make mistakes, and it's important to understand that even senior leadership in church can make mistakes, and the right thing to do is to rectify the mistake and try not to do it again. So yeah, but my point is that different people define cults differently. The country bans Jehovah's Witnesses. Mainstream churches condemn the Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and the Mormons, even though the Seventh-day Adventists and the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints have buildings, and they're expanding in Singapore, especially the Mormons. And also, I belong to a church where other people in Singapore considered as a cult. And yeah, I think we had cult-like qualities. I think a cult is on a continuum. So if being on a cult is a continuum, There are hardcore ones, like the ones you've heard about in the States, where people, when they try and leave, they'll come and take you back, and you will be like excommunicated from your family and friends. I think the one that I was in was a little more chill. I think I lost a lot of my friends, but they didn't try to get me back. I think even though that people wanted to shut the church down because it was perceived to have undue influence on its members, I don't think we were brainwashed per se. We all had a choice. So like in the book, the author said that people don't join cults, they join groups. And then groups can unwittingly turn into cults, whether it's your sports group that you are in, the political party that you join or believe in, even a social group. They all have the potential to turn into cults with a charismatic leader and unquestioning obedience. So I think the important thing is to constantly evaluate the environment you're in and ask yourself, am I in a cult? And the second point I like to make about the book, which was like, it's a little bit like a cult sandwich, because the first part was her in the Children of God church, Children of God cult. The middle part was her in going to high school and college, which was very, very short. I wish she wrote more about it because it was interesting. I wanted to know whether how she fit in, how she learned to fit in, even though she never did. But the part 3, which was a big chunk, was about her life in the US Army. So what I felt was, as much as it was like in a cult, what was striking was the utter misogyny that was in the US Army. So I've not been to Army in Singapore, even though I nearly wanted to, but I was thwarted by my parents. I was going to join the Navy. But yeah, I think what was striking, at least for her as well, was how the misogyny in Army mirrored the misogyny in the cult. So women were not allowed to have positions of power. And that mirrored the church. Some of the churches I've seen in Singapore, women are not allowed to have positions of power in church, and it's backed up by the Bible. But yeah, what about in the Bible? There were people like Deborah and Priscilla, and they were leaders in their own right. And even if you belong to a church where women are in places of power, they are pastors or they are cell group leaders, I think a church can still be misogynistic in subtle ways. So in the evangelical church I used to be a part of, I remember distinctly from the pulpit, the senior pastor said, in a marriage, if a husband wanted his wife to have plastic surgery, she should go and do it. Which, looking back, is extremely misogynistic. But at that time, I didn't think too much about it, and no one thought that it was an issue. So I think that's like the environment you are in shapes your thought patterns, right? And in another example, and I understand that this was implied, but women were to serve men. So anytime men wanted to have sex, women were supposed to serve them. So in a sense, women were like sex slaves. So I sincerely believe some of the Christian men who were my friends did not believe in the concept of marital rape. Fun fact, in Singapore, marital rape was only recently repealed in 2020. But yeah, I think it gives you much food for thought on how religion is extremely misogynistic. And it's not just Christianity. In the religions I've explored, whether Christianity or Buddhism or Taoism, I think if we don't see a woman in power, there are times when it's unconscious. There'll be like religious bro energy, like gym bros, crypto bros. Religious bros are a thing, and it's extremely distasteful. And yeah, I genuinely think there is no malice, and it's unconscious, but it exists. So I just want to let you know, if you're a queer kid in church, you matter. Unquestioning obedience is not okay. And if you feel like you're in a cult, and if you're in a safe place, financially able, I hope you can take steps to leave. Because even though you lose all your friends, you might lose your family, at least you have your own autonomy, and consent will be a thing. You can live your own life instead of living a life that someone else chooses you to live. So I'm curious to know, have you ever joined a cult-like group before? What was your experience like? How do you escape it? Please share in the comments down below. And thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, you can donate to my Ko-fi, which is at ko-fi/makan and meaning. Or you can buy me a book, and the link is in the bio. Otherwise, please share this with a friend whom you think might benefit from watching it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!